Back in the early 2010s, not many anime were being released, but one in 2012 was the biggest and probably one of the most influential releases of all time. You know what I'm talking about. Sword Art Online. I know, this anime was hella popular and still sticking around till today, but, and a very big but at that, is that there was another anime that was released which I personally feel was overshadowed by SAO even though it came out 3 years later. I'm talking about Danmachi, or Is It Wrong to Pick Up Girls in a Dungeon? And I know, relax. It's early 2010s, anime is super horny, this title is awful, but I promise this is pretty interesting. Now I feel it was not only overshadowed because back then not many anime were being released, SAO was insanely popular, and more importantly they just have similar-ish genres, but one of the bigger differences is that SAO was virtual fantasy and Danmachi was real fantasy, but they both had the whole fantasy harem video gamey elements going on which made them decently similar. Now going straight to Danmachi, and the whole point of this video is the fact that I feel Danmachi had insane missed potential. And I realize that's some crazy stuff to say, that I have ideas that could improve a piece of media, but I just want to go over some points that I feel like could have made Danmachi a better experience and one that could have toppled the Goliath that is SAO. My main reason being is the fact that I just really liked this anime when it came out, way more than SAO, but looking back on it now, it just hurts because all I see are the flaws that to me burn it out. There's a lot of videos talking about SAO being good or being bad, but I don't feel there are as many eyes on this series, so I wanted to shed some light on it because it was one of my favorites. Also because like SAO, it's still ongoing today. I think just for clarity and pacing's sake, we're going to split this video into a few segments. First, I'm going to give a small introduction about the series, then I'll be going over what I think is good / interesting about Danmachi and what actually separates it from SAO. And then we'll go over exactly just what problems I had with it, and if fixed, how it could be made better. By the way, spoilers for like the whole show, especially since the recent season 5 just finished airing, so if you haven't seen it, this is your heads up. So, in Danmachi, our main character Belle is a kid in a not well-known familia in the town of Arario. Familias are essentially guilds which are under different gods that have come down to Earth to help humans, like Hephaestus, Hestia, Freya, and Hermes. Joining a familia gives you the power to become an adventurer and essentially gives you video game-like stats and the ability to level up. It's set in a world where dungeons sprout out of the ground, and I know in today's anime / webcomic world, stories like these are really old and said and done, but this was like 10 years ago, so back then it was an interesting new concept. In our story, Belle gets saved by this girl named Eyes Wallenstein from a giant minotaur and idolizes her and wishes to become strong enough to stand by her. This was his innate resolution and essentially gives us, the viewers, his goal for the series. This desire, in turn, gives him an ability which helps him level up faster as long as his initial desire to catch up to her stays the same. Basically his cheat-like ability. On top of a colorful cast of characters and a world brimming with intrigue, that is more or less the premise. I think for me, what I really love about this story is unlike SAO, it's closer to a classic shonen story. And what I mean by that is that we have a character who constantly has to keep trying to get stronger and fighting bigger and bigger challenges. Belle, while being strong and amazing in his own right, constantly has difficulties he has to face over and over again. We constantly see him just get mollywopped so many times, but him getting back up and stealing his resolve is the best part to me. In SAO, Kirito is literally labeled a beater, aka a beta tester / cheater, because of just how strong he is. And he's just known for being super overpowered, and like that's it. He's just an amazing 14-year-old hacker / video game god and everything goes his way. Seriously, he never has to train or anything, and in an MMORPG type of game where you would think parties and strategies are needed to take down bosses, here he is doing it all on his own. Regardless, another thing that I love about Danmachi's story is how many interesting elements are actually here. There's mentions of the dungeon being alive. We don't know how big the dungeon actually is, the gods and their traditions, the idea of human souls being reborn from heaven and how monster souls are probably similar and the dungeon is their cycle of rebirth, the Xenos being a thing and how they're hated by humans and monsters, the Familia Wars. There's just so many interesting concepts here that this story is filled with. The music goes hard, especially the heroes theme that Belle has. Holy shit, does that slap hard as fuck. Also, the Minotaur fight in season 1 is literally the best thing ever. From the voice acting in the scene to how it connects to who Belle is at his core and how he has to challenge himself to overcome this obstacle, it's so fucking good. Genuinely, this is a peak fight in my opinion. By the way, I do need to gush about the Xenos concept in more detail here because it is just so awesome. Okay, so the Xenos are monsters who have sentience, to put it simply, and through some altercations, Belle has to not only overcome what is essentially written and taught into him, that monsters are evil, but he later in that season has to make a choice that goes against everyone, where he chooses to save a Xenos even if it makes him detested by other adventurers and a hypocrite. Personally, I fucking love this part of the season, because while we have seen Bell overcome difficulties in terms of fighting, this was one of morality and character, which I think is super interesting for a shonen protagonist, to have their ways of thinking challenged. Also, how the Xenos Minotaur is the same reborn Minotaur that Bell defeated in season 1 is just so cool. Okay, I need to calm down. So what to me separates Danmachi from SAO? Since if they're decently similar in a lot of regards, because while yeah, they both have the whole harem protagonist being super strong thingy, I think the first thing that speaks out to me is the difference in genres. But Frost, aren't they both action-adventure shonen stories? How different could they be? Yeah, I know, but SAO is very akin to another story which I personally have very strong feelings towards that I'll have to get into another time, but it's solo leveling. And to me, what compares these two together is the fact that they're both power fantasies. That's what's different about Danmachi. Bell is never the strongest. It's never about him deleting shit. It's about him getting stronger and overcoming walls. Kirito doesn't really face that. In fact, most of his show is just to show how strong and awesome he is. He's just a self-insert character, which is fine, but to me isn't very interesting. I personally think it's much more interesting to have a character like Bell who has moments of dejection, self-doubt, reflection, sadness, anger, motivation. He has multiple sides to him. So while Danmachi is more like your Naruto's and your Hitman Reborn, SAO is more like your solo levelings and Eminence in the Shadow. Although this one's actually pretty funny. Another aspect to me that separates these two is their world building, and by that I mean SAO literally ends by episode 14 of the first season because they beat the game, which also there wasn't really any world building. Like seriously, they talked about like hundreds of floors, but we barely got to really explore any of them. They didn't even feel like they were different worlds or floors, it just felt like all one, like continuous thing. Yeah, there's more seasons after that and other video gamey worlds to explore, but it's literally called Sword Art Online, and I feel as though we barely got to know the world of Sword Art Online. Some ideas were actually pretty interesting, like PKers and how not all players would want to risk their life trying to be bosses, but would instead contribute in other ways, like being blacksmiths or caretakers of children that also got stuck in the game. But these ideas just were never nearly explored enough, because if they were, I think it would harden into the heads of the viewers just how brave someone would have to be to put their life on the line to try and beat a boss, or even participate to try to beat a floor boss. In fact, most characters Kirito meets is just adding to his harem for a bit, and that's like all of their depth. Oh, but small side note, I really did like the idea of how food made from menus tasted like mid, but food made by hand had like real flavor. That was a cool idea because it was something only SAO could explore with its setting. To be fair though, Log Horizon did it better. In regards to characters, Danmachi also suffers from the whole bland harem thing, but side characters do get more moments, and sometimes they're actually pretty good, like Lily developing into a leader/strategist and Valve crafting that mega sword. I went over it briefly by listing them, but Danmachi also suffers from the same problems as SAO, because it does have a myriad of interesting concepts, but they aren't nearly explored enough. I think it only slightly beats SAO in this regard, because unlike SAO, the world of Aurario doesn't end after 19 episodes. There's not an end goal to it. It's a living, breathing place. It's not a video game, it's real life. So now we get to what is wrong with Danmachi and what could be fixed to make it better. Okay, so pause. Like SAO, Danmachi has this whole level up aspect system going on, but in Danmachi, this is a very pivotal and important story element throughout the entire thing. So, unpause. As previously mentioned, Bell's whole goal is to get stronger so that he can stand by Eyes and hopefully impress her to date her. And in episode 8, which is the best episode by the way, Bell is struggling to figure out how to level up because there's not exactly a guide or anything of the sort, but he knows that he can't stay the same. So he talks to this other character, Ryu, who is fucking awesome by the way, who tells him this.
クラネルさん、ランクアップの条件は言い換えれば冒険をするということです。
And I feel this conversation was the most interesting in the whole show. This, I feel like, could have set up for some really interesting moments in the show. To me, this reads as you could level up for literally anything. Yeah, she says in practice it's defeating a powerful opponent, but then she follows it up with this.
人の数だけ冒険には意味があります。あなたが直面する冒険がどういったものになるかはわからないですが、その意味から目をそらさないでください。
To me, this means killing a big monster, saving a village from doom, pushing past your own limitations, growing and becoming something new, possibly even challenging your own morality and ideals, such as using Bell fighting his own morality to save the Xanos could have been a trigger to level up. This, my friends, is so intriguing because if explored, that means we wouldn't only have to watch Bell get stronger by fighting monsters, but we could see other sides of him where he faces a truly formidable task that's not only kill big bad monster A. If the idea of level ups were explored more loosely with things like saving the Xanos, we could see Bell, and on top of that, seeing what causes other characters to level up could be just as interesting, because then not all level ups and their reasons would be the same. And I think it would add a lot more to every character to see just what their personal formidable task was that caused them to level up B. And this is where, to me, Danmachi slips up. Don't get me wrong, watching our main character get stronger and fighting bigger baddies is really cool, but for me, watching characters grow in interesting ways is just so much better. Anyway, we fast forward in this episode and Bell fights this thing. Quick side note, I love the voice acting from Bell here. For some reason, how he yells at Lily to run away just really gets me in my feels.
Lily, Lily, 逃げて逃げていや逃げろよダメです早く行け
He gets saved by his idol eyes once again, and in parallel to the beginning of the story, he has this moment of disappointment in himself, only for him to steal his resolve after realizing that unless he changes himself right now, that he'll always be the same just as he was in episode 1. Anyway, he defeats this guy alone, and everyone is in shock and awe at the fact that he did this. Cool! This was a cool fight with some build-up, and seeing Bell overcome this monster, which parallels the beginning of the story, and Bell's whole reason for wanting to get stronger, is very good storytelling in my opinion. The scene was choreographed amazingly, the animation was sick, the music was tight as fuck, and the ending to it was phenomenal knowing that Bell leveled up. I loved this. But then we have like 4 more episodes, so where does that leave us? Well, Bell and crew visit this underground city, and after going through some mayhem in the last episode, Bell, with the help of everyone, kills this giant floor boss monster. And that's where the season ends. I get it. This was the big finale, so they wanted a giant fight to end it off with. And yeah, the fight was pretty good, but all I could think was the big Minotaur fight before this was way cooler. It had more epic buildup and the meaning behind it was way more important. Now I feel this failure is a conjunction of things, because I think the Minotaur fight should have been the season finale. Not only was it related to the beginning, but just as a checkpoint in Bell's story of getting stronger, having it leave off where he gets to level 2 feels like a great stopping point for a season, because we have to remember Bell's goal: to get stronger. The last 4 episodes felt very rushed, and honestly, they could have spent more time exploring the characters and the world in the middle of the season and ended off with the Minotaur fight. Because if we did leave off where he levels up, the level up itself could have been given more importance. We could have been left on the cliffhanger of what does being level 2 mean? What's going to happen in season 2? What will be the new big bad thing he will have to face B? Not only is the level up system shown to be of significant importance because of just how hard it is for people to actually level up, but because of this difficulty, having each level up be a stopping point for each season could be way more significant. Remember, Bell's whole goal is to get stronger. Level ups are paramount to this, so having these as checkpoints just makes sense. So that's the other thing. Danmachi feels very rushed. Like those last 4 episodes in the first season didn't need to happen, or more specifically, they could have been pushed back. There's other things in the Danmachi world that I think could have been explored to help it make it feel more alive. Some examples that won't even touch any of the content season 2 or onwards are the relationship of Bell's familia and the god Miyaka Naza, why the gods came down to Arario. I mean, they kind of mention it in passing, but I would like to know different gods' specific reasons for doing so. How does the stat system work? What do the stats mean? Knowing this would make the level ups cooler. How the dungeon came to be. More about other familias. Velf's whole backstory, and by that I mean I don't know if they expand upon it later, but they talk about the Crosos being magic blacksmiths and how Welf doesn't want to make magic swords. I feel that in and of itself is pretty interesting because, like, why doesn't he want to? What event specifically caused this realization? It would add a lot more depth to his character. Also, just having like other male characters would be cool. I mean, we do get some later on, but they just aren't as important or shown as much. These are just some of the ideas that have been mentioned that I think could have been used to make season 1 feel more full if expanded upon. Specifically, season 1 and 2 are really rushed because they have each like 2 major events happen. Season 1 is the Minotaur fight and the big village fight, and season 2 is about the Familia Wars and the Night District fight. Bell levels up so fast that I don't even realize when he got to level 4 by like season 3. They even mention he has this cool name, the Record Holder, specifically because he leveled up faster than anyone ever has ever. But fuck, it's so fast, I don't even know when it happened. It was so fast that unlike his first level up, the next ones don't even feel important. It's just like, oh, he's level 4 now, I guess. Cool. Which sucks, because as mentioned, his whole goal is to get stronger. So you would think him leveling up would be way more important and milestoney. The next main thing for me that I think Danmachi should have fixed, but I guess I kind of get it because that's what was popular at the time, is its harem aspect, which I know is ironic for a show labeled Is It Wrong to try to pick up girls in a dungeon. And I'm not saying ill girls why there's so many, but what I am saying is its etchiness feels overplayed and unwelcome. I tried avoiding mentioning her at all until now because it's just my biggest gripe, but Hestia, Jesus fuck Hestia, dude. Almost everything about her annoys me, from her terrible character design to how loud she is. She is the pinnacle of the whole ecchi shit that is just wrong with this story in my opinion. I mentioned it, but there's not as many males in this story as there are females, which is fine, but most of the females aren't interesting, especially the main heroiness. Aiz is boring as fuck. Lily is interesting, but why even after season 3, where they're rich, that her and Hestia are still dressed in rags? There's the cat girls in the tavern, Tiona and Tiona, Seer, Ryu, Makoto, Haruhime, Aisha, Chigusa, Cassandra, Daphne, Freya. You get the idea. Now some of these characters are expanded upon later pretty interestingly, but most are just used for eye candy at the beginning, and I just hate it. But Hestia... Okay, my issues with Hestia are a lot. Her design is trash. Why the big boob lolly? Her outfit sucks, and in my opinion, the whole gods in love with their familia members is weirdly incestuous, because they literally call humans the children of the mortal realm, or their children, so seeing Hestia so infatuated with Belle and stuff is just weird. Now, to give it credit, at the end of season 2, they do tackle this idea of love between gods and children in a pretty decent way, and it makes sense in some capacity, but it just doesn't work for me between Belle and Hestia, mainly because she's treated as the main gag character. Her love is a joke, or the way it's played is a joke, which all sucks because I love some of the moments she has with Belle. When she gave Belle his knife, when she holds him and agrees to help him get stronger, when she sends this old man off to his grave happy. The moments where she is truly a goddess are her best moments, but most of the time she's just a gag, and it sucks because with good redesign of her character and the way she interacts with Belle, I think they could have been given an even better dynamic. Don't get me wrong, if they want to keep the love between gods and children, season 2 did a decent job of explaining it, but like I said, it's just Hestia specifically that I have an issue with. So I guess what I'm saying is, at the end of it, if Danmachi focused more on its level ups, had more interesting ways for characters to level up, did less harem shit, focused more on its world exploring its interesting ideas, and changed Hestia, then in my opinion it could have been an amazing story with the greats and toppled SAO. It really has all the elements to do so. Instead, the rest of the series follows suit in this formula, in a sense, or maybe a disregard of what its formula could have been. It mentions cool concepts but never expands upon them. It adds more female characters for the harem every season. It speeds past through events, barely giving them any time to breathe. Like mentioned in the beginning, the whole point of the story, Belle's goal itself is to get stronger. And as Ryu puts it, there are many ways that he could level up and in turn get stronger, but instead that's thrown to the wayside after season 1, or at least that's what it feels like. It more so turns to what its title is, which is girls. What girl will Belle save this time? What girl are we going to focus on this season? And I get it, but it almost has nothing to do with Belle's initial goal. This harem shit takes over basically the whole point of the story, because it's like, okay, what girl is he going to save this season? Yeah, every now and then Belle talks about getting stronger, and he does, but it just never has the same importance or impact as the first season. No, the first 8 episodes of the story. And I wholly think it's because every other time he levels up, every other time he wants or needs to get stronger, it's for someone else. But I think what made the Minotaur fight hit the hardest was because Belle wasn't fighting for anyone. Belle was fighting for Belle. Okay, this one was just a bit longer than my last video, but I hope you enjoyed. I rewatched the entire series just to make sure I didn't mix up anything, even though I'm sure I still did. Regardless, this was really fun to make, and if you liked it, all the good stuff like likes, comments, subscribes would be very much appreciated. So here's to the next video. Thanks for your time, and have a good night. And also, like SAO, it's still ongoing till day. Till day? Familias are essentially guilds which are under different gods that have come down to Earth to help humans, like Hephaestus, Harry's? What the fuck? Familias are essentially guilds which are under different gods that have come down to Earth to help humans, like Hephaestus. What the frick?